Hello there and welcome to episode 47 of the Your Next Chapter podcast. This is Angela, and this week I'm having a wholehearted conversation with Veronica Strachan, and I know you're going to love this one. Now, Veronica talked about her experience of realizing that joy had sort of disappeared from her life. Now, from the outside looking, and this is so darn common with so many of our lives, things looked fine. I mean, this was a woman with a fabulous corporate background who ticked a lot of boxes and scored a lot of goals, to use those classic analogies. But she woke up realizing that the joy, that feeling of desire for her own life had dissipated. And in fact, she realized she was tired of following other people's agendas and dreams, and she realized it was time for her. Now, that big leap out of corporate world into establishing your own business can be very scary, but Veronica has developed signposts that you can recognize and cultivate along the way to actually creating an abundant and enjoyable next chapter. But she wants to let you know some other things as well, which I know are really going to resonate with you. So if you've ever had that feeling of, is this it? Is this as good as it gets? Well, the answer is no. You can actually choose to live a half-life which looks fine. It's fine on the outside, but inside you know there's something missing. So you can choose to stay with that half-life, that safe life, or you can choose to take action and start to develop a remarkable life. And here's where it's really important that you hear this point. A remarkable life is your life, the way that you want it to be. Doesn't mean you have to run out there and change the world, though of course if you want to, that's also a remarkable desire. But the thing is that there could be some things that are inside that have sort of trampled down on your emotions and held you back. And in Veronica's case, that was the death of her young child, going back a long time, more than 20 years. But she had pushed that pain down for a very long time and realized that she hadn't really dealt with it. So one of the pieces as she moved into her next chapter was writing her book. And as she says, that book took 7 months and 20 years to write. And it is very, very worthwhile having a read of it and actually experiencing and stepping through the lessons that Veronica has to share with you there. You can also download the workbook as well that goes along with it. The book is called Breathing While Drowning, and it's something that I think a lot of us can relate to when it comes to dealing with that pain and disappointment that could be in our background. But what we're looking at here, and as we move through this conversation, are those signposts that you can recognize and then utilize to move forward into your own next chapter. Now, Veronica goes into them in great detail, but just to give you a snippet, the pieces that you're looking for is to be conscious, to be curious, to be courageous, to recognize that you are capable and creative, and to look for connection, and to move through confusion and feeling conflicted, and to opening where you've once been closed. It's one of those conversations that I really do hope open you up to what could be possible in your next chapter. So without me carrying on anymore, let's hear from Veronica. Thanks for tuning in today. Inspiration, clarity, confidence, and wholehearted business strategy. Welcome to Your Next Chapter, the podcast especially for women in their 40s and beyond who know that business and personal development go hand in hand. Tune in each week for marketing, mindset, and personal growth strategies, along with inspiring stories from women around the world who are creating new businesses and lives that are personally fulfilling and financially rewarding. If you're looking to create a business and life you love, you're in great company. Let's find out what will unfold in your next chapter. I'm your host, Angela Rasmus, and I'm so delighted that you're here.
So my next chapter began really with deciding that I was sick of following other people's agendas and sick of building their dreams for them, and it was time to build my own dream. So really I've had so many next chapters that it's a bit of an encyclopedia, but the last one, I think, which is the step into the entrepreneurial space, is that very thing. And there was a quote by somebody Gaskins who said, if you don't follow your own dream, then someone else will hire you to build theirs. And that's exactly where I found myself. I kept searching for this something that would fill up my life and give me the purpose. I worked as a nurse and midwife at national projects, ran departments, then ran companies, and still it was not quite there. And yet even when I moved into my own company, the thing that was missing for me was that connection with really joyful life. And so the extra learning and those kind of radical transformations that I made through following some of the mentors and teachers I found along the way have really brought me to the point of being an entrepreneur, a coach, and really my latest iteration, the next chapter, which is being a writer and releasing my book, which is all about the memoirs and the journey and the signposts that I found along the way.
And that's so interesting to hear that. And a lot of people don't mention it, is that I went through all these different chapters and then I took the leap and I started my own business and it still didn't feel quite right. Yeah, we often hear the fairy stories of, and I started my own business and everything was fabulous from that point forward. But as you're indicating there, is that there's evolution still to come. There's new stories still to be written within that particular chapter. And I like how you were saying that you were aware that the missing component for you was the joy. So why was that missing, and how did you recapture it?
For me, the joy kind of went out of my life a long time ago when my young daughter, Jackie Bree, died just before she was 5. And that was 20 years ago. And as I'm sure everyone can imagine, the grief that follows the loss of a child was incredible. And it felt for me as though I was drowning in an ocean. And the ocean really swallowed me for a long time. And it was all I could do just to get up every day and breathe in and breathe out. So the joy was really so far behind a really big thick wall, because I put the wall up to keep all the bad stuff out, but of course that kept so much of the good stuff out as well. And I learned to sort of stay at that kind of breeze along, just get things done, go faster, and then, none of those emotions will catch up with you. But I realised, decades later really, that I had missed so much of the joy. And it was more than that. It was also, I think, the journey that women take, particularly, women in the Western world who 50 years ago, we were a different breed altogether. 100 years ago, we would have died before we were 50. Whereas now we're articulate, educated, passionate, really ready to make a difference in the world. And I hadn't found something that gave me that joy. So the disconnect from the emotional world, and then not really knowing what my passion was, that's why I had this kind of, the hole, that not being fulfilled. And that, go on.
Oh, that word fulfillment, that's the one that I hear come up so often, that we can go through the motions and we can get into this place of just accepting this is as good as it's going to get.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I had, when I saw that movie, I thought, oh, that is just so me. I had a couple of girlfriends who I finally admitted that despite the fact that I was a CEO, I had a great job, I had a great family, what looked like a good life, I was not happy. And that's the question that I said, is this as good as it gets? And I felt really guilty asking that question when it looked like I had it all. Shouldn't I be happy with that? Shouldn't I be content? But there was just no fulfillment. There was still this big hole somewhere in my chest that said, there's more, keep looking.
And what did that search look like for you when you recognized, and I think I remember us talking about this before, when you had that conversation with your girlfriends, when you actually decided, and you all in that circle decided to get honest, you found out that you weren't alone. There was quite a few of you who were, is this it? Is that all? And so how did you decide at that point? How did that provide the impetus for you to actually start to search for joy? What did you do from there?
Well, it was incredible to feel that I wasn't alone, because I'd felt so alone for so many years. And, often when you're a leader, you can be friendly but not friends, because you're, busy trying to manage people's lives. That's the way I felt that I had to lead. So what we did was that we thought there must be women out there, because we all came from kind of a corporate business type world. We thought, well, perhaps it's the women that look more spiritual, who have got it all together. The women with more, I don't know, natural things. And so we thought we'd go along to some women's retreats and we try some of these things where they unpacked you a little bit. But we had some absolutely hilarious adventures, which are probably, you don't have quite time for. But, because it was just so not my world, I would show up and these people would try to hug me and I'd go, get away from my space. What are you doing? Get up, get away from me. But, with good friends, we realised that, okay, we're here. One place we went to at the back of Queensland, which just run by the most beautiful women up there that I now know. It was so important for me to go there, but I felt like a fish out of water. And I'd kind of left, busy corporate and come to the back, and there was no tea, there was no coffee, there was no meat, there was no phones. What was I going to do? So we went through some of these really amazing retreats, and each little one, although it wasn't the whole answer, was part of the answer. For me, it's like a signpost that says, look at that material, talk to those people, experience this, and there's a little bit of gold in there for you.
I think that's such an important point, and I'd like to just run around that point for a moment. That idea that no individual event or no individual thing you did was like the eureka moment, and look, everything I need was in this one retreat or in this one guide or in this one book. It was more of a case of that you saw that they were all ingredients, I guess, in the overall recipe.
Oh, absolutely. And for me, that was a really important thing, because as I started to swing towards the more spiritual side, it's almost as though I divorced all of the expertise and skill and memories and friendships that I'd had in the corporate world. I mean, I'd been a nurse and worked in that area of health for 30 years, but I kind of left all those things and kind of dismissed them. And I swung too far to the spiritual side and thought, well, this must be where the answer is, but it's not. Only by swinging back and finding my own way and picking the bits up from all sides of my life, from everything that I believe and think and do, that's when I found that joy, that fulfillment really feels like it's coming home.
That's a very similar experience. I can relate to that entirely. When I first stopped my marketing agency, because I was in that pure strategic writing marketing plans, business plans, etc., building websites with my team, and I went, I am so over this. I want nothing to do with it ever again. And my pendulum swung completely over to the other side.
You're kind of that
totally. I divorced myself of thee, and so I went completely to the self-worth side and really embraced, and similar to you, I guess, looking at the real spiritual part of life and thinking, well, I'm unfulfilled, the answers must be there. And I don't discount that exploration that I did, because as you identified before, there were pieces. So every experience I had, I picked up a little piece, because, we're such a mosaic, and nothing we have done in our lives is unworthy. Nothing that we have won't contribute to where we're going now. But we swing backwards and forwards, giving ourselves that permission to explore, and then you settle in the place that at this point really works for you. And that sounds like that's the, when you found that place, that's when you really started to flourish.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting because so many people want your answers as you become more and more comfortable. And I would keep saying to them, keep looking. Here's some things that I tried, but keep looking. Don't take this as the gospel truth, the script or the direct way to make a cake. You've got to add your own ingredients and make it uniquely yours. And that creating that thing that is uniquely yours is so important. And I often say to people that I'm coaching, you are the sum of all the experiences, all the skills, all the memories to this very point, and you are exactly where you need to be. You do need to take that internal journey, but don't discount all the things that you've done to this point, because that is exactly who you are.
And we hear that a lot with, I think that's so important to internalize, because actually this is a conversation I've just come back to running a retreat with my mastermind program. And one of the things that we picked each other up on was using the word just. Well, I'm just a mother, or I'm just a this, or I'm just a coach, or I've just done this. And it's like, no. Don't minimize yourself in that way. You are this magnificent combination of all of those experiences that can now be brought together to shift you into your next chapter. So watch out for the dreaded just. We must eradicate that one from our vocabulary.
Definitely. And it's interesting when people start to take that one. I suggest that they remove just and but.
And but, oh yeah, that's a good one. That's got to go as well.
Yes, because, if you don't mind, but I'd like, and it's that apology that to be who we are or to put our things forward. And in this year where, International Women's Day is the theme is to be bold, it is something that I say to people all the time. Take out the just and take out the but. Put it in as an and.
Oh, I like that. So we'll replace that as an and. Yeah, so no minimising the space that we take up in the world, step into it proudly.
Yep, all of you.
So tell us, when you mentioned before that I was using the analogy of the ingredients for the recipe, and you brought up the concept of signposts, and I know this is a big part of what you share in your book. And as you said, this next chapter that you have moved into now brings you into the realm of author as well. So talk to us about the book. Where did, I guess, first and foremost, the desire to actually create the book? I think a lot of us have this, or maybe, I know I certainly have, maybe I'll write a book one day, but you actually did it. So talk to us about that.
I did actually do it, and it took me 7 months and 20 years. So don't be afeard if you haven't got to it yet. It is never too late to start. And this was part of me looking at what are the things that would bring me joy. And I had always wanted to write. As a little girl, really shy, big family, I wrote stories a lot. They were about pixies and all sorts of things. But I loved writing stories, and I loved getting lost in a book. That was important to me. I liked the fact that it could take you somewhere and help you escape whatever was there in front of you, even if it was the dishes that you were supposed to be doing. But when I came to give myself time to write, then what I was trying to write was a fantasy series because, I love the science fiction and fantasy. But I just couldn't get past chapter 3. I'd have a great start and I'd get a little bit into the story, and then it would just kind of fizzle. And I kept doing some meditation and putting myself in a good space. And what kept coming out was these messages that I had to write my own story. I had to get that out of my head, and then I would have the clear space to do it. Because what I needed was to see how far I'd come and to work out who I was right now. And so that story was Jackie's story. That was my second daughter who had died. And it was the story of me looking at the young woman that I was, because I wrote journals to Jackie and to all my children when they were young, because my mum was a great storyteller, but I was quite a shy kid and I wasn't great at telling a story. I could write it, but I couldn't tell it. So I wrote journals to all my children, and I was a working mother, so this was really important for me to share the little bits and pieces that I had of their day. I didn't always have the calendar to write on if I was, busy at work, but I would usually be able to find a few moments to share some of the really gorgeous things that they did. And for my time with Jackie, that was so important because it had so many memories of arriving at, doctor's appointments and hearing the diagnosis of her, epilepsy and her severe brain injury and the prognosis for her life, and being told by, various people in my beloved health profession that they couldn't do anything, and our search for somewhere to help her learn to live. So the journals were incredibly important. But the writing of the book 20 years later was not only cathartic, but I realised how hard I had been on myself as a young mum. And I could really look with compassion now and say, wow, look at the lessons that you learnt for both of us. And I could see that I had come so far.
That point there, just to pop in for a moment, and you're recognising how hard you'd been on yourself when you were younger. That being hard on ourselves, I think, is a recurring theme that comes up as women are considering moving into next chapters, and the way that they harshly judge themselves about what's possible, or how they haven't, reached the milestones that they expect and projected that they should have, etc., etc. So that being hard on yourself is that recurring theme. How did you begin to arrest that? How did you begin to lift and change the tone and the voice? You've said that you could see with self-compassion that there'd been growth, but that's a really big step. I'd like to just unpack that a little bit more.
I was looking at self-compassion in terms of coaching, and I could hear the echoes, and they say that we teach what we need to learn. And so I was finding that the women coming to me for coaching were all reflecting this kind of self-critical nature. And so I began to look at the research. The scientific head means that I look at the research, and I looked at the evidence behind self-compassion and the fact that if you practice self-compassion and if you practice gratitude and raise your vibrations and do those kind of things, you can really change the way you think. So part of the self-transformation and the self-reflection journey had been that. And by looking at that young woman as somebody different, somebody outside myself, I could say if I had showed up in my life, I would have gone, oh my God, I need to give you a big hug. Look what you've had to put up with. Look at, I lost my mum, I lost my child, and I lost the life that I thought I would have with her. So to do that takes a really conscious, regular habit of reflecting. And I still fall into those self-critical puddles, and I have some really good friends who go, oh yeah, here she goes again, beating herself up, and they stop me. And they know that if I get into that downward spiral, that sometimes I can get myself out, but sometimes I need to go, oh yeah, stop, start, where you going now? So good friends, good habits.
That's a big one. As you said, a conscious, regular habit of reflection. Because it seems that, and you've obviously heard the same thing with your clients, and what I hear is that we tend to hold ourselves to a different standard, a higher standard, a more exacting standard than we hold anybody else.
Absolutely, we're absolutely terrible. Talk about perfection. It's way up there past perfection. Because how dare you be human? You're now carrying the weight of the world on your shoulders, and it really is a good reminder to do the self-care stuff, to go and have a massage. And people would say to me, my God, your shoulders are like rocks. What are you doing? And I'd think, I'm holding the world on my shoulders. I'm holding myself so carefully so that I don't drop it. But I began to realize that it's not my responsibility to hold everybody else up. That the best thing that I could do for them, especially my children that I still have and my gorgeous husband, is to be just accountable for myself and to show up as all of me with all the, the twos and fro's, the foibles and the faults, but also with far more fun so that we could really enjoy life together. And that really keeps me grounded.
Yeah, and that's being an example, isn't it? It's not just saying, do as I say, it's do as I do.
It's do as I do. Yeah,
absolutely. And I feel that very much with my daughter as well, of needing to show how, or to model for her what self-compassion looks like, because I have a tendency, my natural bent is to be hard on myself and to expect more of myself. That is just the habit of a lifetime. And I, like you, I have to have that conscious reflection of what would this look like, or how would you respond to somebody else in this situation? And another one I think, which you and I have spoken about, is hindsight, reverse gapping, looking back at how far you've come, not just how far you've yet to go.
Absolutely.
It's an important one. So we started to write this book. We realised that the fantasy series was going to have to stay on the shelf for a little while until this story was extracted. Yes. So talk us through the concepts within the book, because I think, and I encourage everybody, and we'll certainly put the link on the show notes on my website page of where to find the book so they can go purchase it and perhaps even get the workbook that I'm aware goes along with it. But talk us through the lessons that are inherent in here, like the signposts that you feel are most important to help people through to this new space.
Okay. So the book's in 4 parts, and the first part is about the defining moments and really those kind of unremarkable early years. And I say unremarkable because for me, remarkable is a really important word. It means worthy of attention. And what I discovered by writing about myself, originally I had no intention of publishing, but what I discovered is that my life was absolutely worthy of my attention. So I spent that time looking at even those sort of unremarkable early years and thought, there were still lessons that I learnt. Then there was the point of when we decided as the 3 of us that we needed to find the feeling, and I decided very much that I needed to remember to learn. So I needed to learn how to feel again. And then I needed to find that healing and to fill up that place in my heart that was full of the grief. And then find that connection to whatever purpose I had in life. And as I started to go through all the journals and all of those things and look back with compassion, I realized that the lesson that I needed to learn in this life was about being powerless. I was powerless to stop Jackie dying. I'd spent, I got bullied a lot through my early years, and in health, unfortunately we do a lot of bullying in health. And so I had to learn to turn that around and realize that what I'd become was an advocate for people who are powerless, whether they were powerless in their own life, whether I was powerless and I was being an advocate for them because they had no one to speak up for them. But that was the kind of flip side that I learned from looking at the journals and reflecting.
Our connection just went a little bit dodgy there for a moment, but that concept of we teach what we need to learn, or in this case we teach what we have learned, and recognizing that powerlessness that you were experiencing. Like, you could respond to the situation with Jackie, but you couldn't change it. And that was, and now,
no matter how hard I worked or how many hours we put in to keep her well, her hold on life was fragile, and that was it. Yeah, we had no control of that, and that was so hard to forgive in myself. Yeah, really hard.
Huge lesson. But then that ability to recognize that and to turn it into advocacy is enormous. And I think that's, again, for anybody listening right now, to recognize that the lessons that you have learned in life, and I'm a huge believer in this, that next chapter businesses are often built on skinned knees. It's those lessons, lessons that we've had, and we've seen the potholes, we've fallen into the damn potholes, and so we can help
times.
Too many damn times. But now with that insight, we can now turn around and help others navigate those pieces of life, in many different ways. So huge lesson there. Okay, let's keep on going with the next signpost.
The next signpost. So what I found was that the words just kind of downloaded into my brain after I'd been looking and realizing that this was really helpful in all of my work. So the signposts that I found were a series of C's: being conscious, being curious, being courageous, being capable, creative, connected, and then a couple that were not so exciting, which is being confused and really conflicted, and then being closed. Yeah.
Can we just skip those ones? Do we have to go through those ones?
I'm tempted, but no. Being closed, being conflicted and confused, really important, because what it led to then is the word that I really love, which is concordant, which is harmony and everything actually in accord with what you want, with what you need in your life. So you've got to have the closed, and I'd spent a lot of time in closed, and it's not a linear thing. For women, we rarely do things in a linear fashion, so you can be really conscious of what you're doing in terms of how you're parenting, but you can be totally confused about what you're doing in terms of your professional life. You can be really creative in, for me, the only creativity I was having was, coming home and I might bake something, and that was a little bit creative. But realizing that all of those things are with me all of the time, being conscious, starting to be aware of how I showed up in the world and who I was and where I wanted to go, and then getting curious about what would it take to be this person, what would it take to get there, and then being really courageous and saying, okay, I need to make some steps, leave the fear there on the shelf, thank you very much, but take some action, and from that action get some experience. From that experience, build self-esteem and confidence, and from that, around and around in the circle till you begin to get that real capability and realize that you have strengths and willpower and so much courage to do what you want to do.
So do you feel with these particular points, Veronica, are these like steps that we go through as an overall to sort of break us free of past beliefs about ourselves so that we can step into something new? And are they the same steps that you go through consistently for all different parts of your life? How does the two pieces sort of work together there?
I believe it's an and.
Yeah.
So So many women get to that point where they say, there's got to be something better than this. And so by going through the being conscious and being curious and being courageous, those are the first three that tend to take you out of that kind of treadmill. But if you use the same signposts in everything that you do, and it can be as responding to, hey, a child leaving home and going to university, and thinking about what is it that I feel about that, and be curious about what's next or what else is possible. And then saying, okay, well, it's going to take a little courage to maybe let them go on their own, and maybe take myself to reinvent, or to, peel off a layer and go deeper on something like this. So, yes, something for you if you want to take some regular steps. And they're general enough that people don't have to get really specific about, if I don't do this, then it won't work. Because you can't unlearn some of these things. And that's what I've really found has been so powerful with this framework that I use, is that people go, oh, now when I look at things, I see, all of that stuff that you've been talking about, and I get really curious, and I can see myself either slipping into those habits or actually thinking, okay, this is the point where I'm at a crossroads and I can take a step with some courage. So I believe both.
And I think that curious part in particular, and I loved how you used the analogy, considering that, yes, of course, my son did leave for university just a couple of weeks ago, and I was very conscious of the emotions that were coming up. But to apply that framework and get curious about, what does this mean now? What's going to happen differently? The courage part, how does one cultivate courage? I mean, it's a word that we use, that we hear a lot, that courage is the antidote to fear, and, to feel the fear and do it anyway, etc., etc. But how does one begin to cultivate courage if we don't feel very courageous?
Yes, it is a really good question. And the way that I talk to people is that it doesn't need to be a leap. Some people are really prepared to take a leap. Some people are hoppers rather than leapers, and sometimes a hop is enough. And for me, the little bits of courage, or little spoonfuls of courage, are resilience. Because women particularly are so good at being resilient, and the characteristics of resilience are the foundations for courage. And if you can talk to people about how is it that you continue to show up day after day, even if it's in a job that you hate, a family that you struggle to keep fed, or a relationship that's not working for you, but it takes a little courage, a little resilience to show up every day. And the other part of resilience is optimism. And to learn optimism, I often start them off on gratitude, because just by realising there are so many things in your day to be grateful for gives them a little sense of optimism. And with that optimism comes the realisation that actually they do have a little courage, because they either stay in the relationship or they stay at the job. That doesn't mean that it's not going to take more courage to step out of it, but they can recognise it's not something new, that there are plenty of times in their life where they've used courage. And so learning just a really small thing, a small act of courage. I talk about even just random acts of kindness are a good way to begin, just to approach a stranger, or to not even approach a stranger and do something that's out of the ordinary for you, is a really good way to practice courage. Doesn't need to be on a big stage, doesn't need to take a whole lot of money, but it can just be a really, really small change.
I love that, Veronica. That's such a beautiful way of describing it, and giving that kernel of hope is that, okay, I might not be ready to go and speak in front of a crowd of 10,000, but I can speak to one person who I might be able to impact with the experience and the insights that I have. So we've got resilience plus optimism with a gentle, with a liberal sprinkling of gratitude is going to build courage. Now there's a recipe. That's a fabulous recipe.
Yeah, that's the recipe. Yeah, for sure.
So, and that's one of those ones where we can actually use that benefit of hindsight again and look back, as you're saying, and recognise our own signposts, that I was courageous there, I was resilient there, I was optimistic about that, I kept going, I'm grateful for. And if we can allow ourselves to actually congratulate ourselves, to recognise that we have actually done well in certain areas, then that's just going to build up those muscles, and you can become more courageous gradually without a huge leap. Not going to wrestle a lion tomorrow, but I could pat the cat.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. Yeah,
I love it.
Yeah. The other thing is you may never be the kind of person who wants to get in front of a crowd and speak. And I know that, public speaking and what is it, divorce and moving house, I think were the biggies in terms of courage. But it might be just courageous to ask another mum at the school drop-off, do you want to go for a coffee? That may be as much courage as you need to take, because who knows what would go on from there. So just to have the courage to be the person that you want to be and to live that life that expresses the very best of who you are is absolutely the way to go.
So that's it. We are going to encourage everybody to practice random acts of courage. Just little ones. You can start with the little ones.
Absolutely. Yes, little ones.
Love it. So if we then move on and look at those next 3 signposts, that to be capable, to be creative, and to be connected. Can you talk to us about that trilogy?
Yeah, so capable actually stems from the courage, and we talked about that a little bit, and realising that, people say, oh, I can't do anything. And I say, well, did you get dressed this morning? Yep. Did you, eat breakfast? Did you get kids off to school? Well, of course you're capable. There are many things that you're capable of. We are so good at dismissing the things we're good at. And this often, when I'm coaching people who are thinking of going into their own business, and they go, oh, yeah, but, why would people buy that from me? Well, because you do it in a blink. But somebody else has no idea where to begin. And there are so many things that are great about what we do, about who we are, and about how we've approached life. And so encouraging them to reflect and to think about the great I am that they are is really important. So that's part of the being capable. And often I get them to do a strengths assessment just to realise some of the characteristics that are part of them, or I get them to ask their friends, what is it about me that you think is one of my strengths? And it's interesting where those conversations start to go, because then people are kind of given that opportunity to hear. And one of the important things that I say to them is that you have to listen and let the gratitude land. Don't toss it off and say, oh, no, I'm not, that's easy, or whatever, or it's only just. There's the just word. Sit and let that compliment or that feedback land on you, and you will know when that's right. And that's when you start to fill that hole.
That can be so hard to take that compliment. And I mean, if we even think in just the most, one of the cliched examples, wow, you look fabulous in that dress. Oh, what, this little thing, it was on special, it was from the secondhand shop, I've had it for years, or we dismiss so quickly. So that's another challenge to set forth to you listening now. When the compliment is put your way, pause and accept it. Pause and accept it. Don't throw it back in the face of the person who's actually giving you the compliment. Pause and accept it. I missed a point that you made there. You said the great I am that you are.
Yes. So there's a fabulous exercise by a woman called Alexandra Franzen, and she's actually given me permission to put this in my workbook, and it's beautiful. So Alexandra Franzen, Franzen, I'll pass the link to you. And it's an exercise that I came across a few years ago, which is just is a little bit of fun, and you spend almost no time at all answering some really easy questions about yourself. And it's, you might think I'm a, nurse, but really I'm a superhero in disguise, or whatever it is. And it's a little bit of fun to think about yourself differently, and it just opens people up. And I often get people to do that before they do their LinkedIn profile or send their bio off, or, speaking of those kind of things, to make it a little bit more all of who they are. And there's that theme again, show up as all of you. And so have that great I am, recognise that you are great.
Oh, I definitely have to have a look for that link. I know Alexandra Franzen's work. She's such an amazing writer. She's a brilliant writer. So yeah, we'll have a look for that exercise. Thank you for bringing that one up. We're going to have some fun with that. Okay, so we've looked at the capable, and what about the creative? People get stuck in a paradigm. Yes. I'm not creative, because they have a paradigm of what creativity is. Yeah.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. And I was the CEO of a little IT company for a little while, and it was quality testing, which can be a bit dry for people who are not in IT, and even for people who are in IT. And I would ask this question because I was trying to build the culture of the organisation to be really innovative. And I'd ask this question of people who were sometimes a little dry with their IT and their interviews. I'd say, how are you creative? And they'd look at me and go, oh, I work in IT. And you go, oh, okay. So do you ever feel that little excitement when you put something together, or when you create a new program or a new app, and they go, oh yeah. I said, well, that's creative. If you design, if you develop, if you do something from nothing, or if you can see a better way, that is all creative. It is such a broad term, and we get so hung up on the fine arts part of it. And I have incredible respect for people who do work in fine arts, but they are not the only creative ones. Writing is creative, but writing blogs is creative. Writing a grant that means that you can get money for, your small community organisation, that's creative. So there are so many ways to do it, and just allow yourself to go, you know what, I actually create a beautiful home for my kids to come into every day after school. That is a real gift as well.
So don't get stuck in the paradigm of creativity. So again, this is the self-appreciation part, isn't it? The not dismissing what it is that comes naturally to you, or just, I guess, turning up the awareness button, dial, so to speak. Yep. Turning up the awareness dial and recognizing that where your creativity comes in. I was certainly in that paradigm of, I can't paint, therefore I'm not creative. Yep. My definition was very, very narrow. Can't paint, can't draw. Loser, not creative.
That's it. Yeah, not creative.
No, so,
whenever I see you, actually, you're always so beautifully put together, and you create the image that reflects on the outside what you are on the inside, which is warm and artistic and generous, and that's what you see when people look at you. So just creating yourself is a beautiful thing.
I'm going to let that compliment land. Thank you.
Excellent. Good.
And that really, this is about connection, when you're actually starting to build connections. So talk to us about how that signpost looks.
Yeah, so connection is fantastic, because by the time people have worked their way through the earlier signposts, they're starting to see how things connect, who they are and how they show up, connects with their values and their strengths, and how it directs them with their creativity, and how their courage allows them to be a bit more creative, or how their curiosity will allow them to explore, a connection with another person or another thing or another artwork or skill. So what I try and help people to do then is look at that signpost and say, yeah, okay, so what am I here for? So this is when you can start to think that life has real meaning and I have a real purpose in being here. It's not one size fits all. It's not I'm here to do X and therefore that's all I've got, but that there are ways along the journey for wholeness, which I believe is going to happen way down the track, that you can connect to the real person that you are, and that brings that sense of fulfillment back in again. So it starts to gather all of the parts of you back, and you actually call those parts back to be all of you and show up as all of you.
So the connection part is not so much about connecting with other people. It's connecting all the pieces that is the tapestry of you and connecting them together.
Absolutely.
Okay, I see it in that respect now. And that one's, I love how that description of, I'm just going to go back to my notes for a second, that you get to see that life has meaning and I have a purpose and a meaning within it. Yeah. And it's saying that your place is at the epicenter of your life, but then it radiates to impact and affect others as well in a positive way. So that's where fulfillment comes in, when you actually see, God damn it, I do have a reason for being. And it doesn't have to be, the size of Oprah or Gandhi. It can be just you impacting on your wee corner of the world, and that feels absolutely enough.
Yeah. And that feeling enough is absolutely what connection brings you, because you can see that there is that, I feel shivery talking about it, and you can just feel that the connection to all of who you are means that you are living the purpose and meaning, whatever that is. Even if you can't find the words to express it, it doesn't matter. People want to have the words that I am this or I do that, but that's not critical. What's critical at this point is recognizing that you are patient and impatient. You're creative and you're lazy and you're fabulous and you're feisty and all of those things. And that is absolutely enough.
And not rejecting the parts of that you perhaps think that the old definitions is that I shouldn't be this or I shouldn't be that. This is a topic that I talk about often with Larissa from Everyday Inspiration, who's my mindset coach and is now also a regular guest on the podcast. And we talk about everybody has every trait. We all have them.
Yes, absolutely.
And it's a continuum, and it's not so that wholeness, that connection to self is that integration of all parts and recognizing and being okay with who you are, with who you are now, and seeing the value in that. So it feels here like I've got this little idea tapping away in the side of my brain here. We all, I know it's a human trait to desire purpose, to really think, what is my purpose? I really have to find it and connect to it, and it's going to be big and it's going to be bright and it's going to be bold, etc. But sometimes it isn't that huge big thing. It can be something that's smaller and quiet but really resonates with you. So I think reassurance is in order here, that when you connect those pieces together, and you may have that aha moment, and it might just be a quiet confirmation that you're on the right path, as opposed to the blazing trumpets and the gates get flowing wide open. And that acceptance of self.
That quiet recognition is really important.
And I think we often see that if we look back, we often find that we've been doing the thing our whole life anyway. I often talk about that. I think overall, my purpose is to inspire. That's what it's about. This whole podcast is about inspiring people for possibility. And if I look back throughout my life, in little ways, that's always been the thing that I've most enjoyed doing, and having people believe in themselves and what's possible for them. And that's just, I happen to be doing it in a different way now than I was when I was like 16. So we can often find those passions, can't we?
Yeah, absolutely. And my purpose is to help people find their way home. And home can be whatever it needs to be for you. Home can be a life on the stage. Home can be a life as a CEO of a hospital. Home can be as a working at home mum. Home can be as an author, a small businesswoman. Whatever that is, when you find your way home, everything in life starts to feel so much more concordant. There's so much more harmony. The serendipitous meetings happen, and life just is a whole lot more joyful and fulfilling.
I love that. I love that idea of finding your way home, because it's got that feeling of certainty and peace about it. Words that I rather like.
Yeah.
But hey, we can't conclude the conversation without looking at those signposts that didn't sound quite so inviting. The confused and the closed and the.
That's it. And so the closed, I think, is a good one to look at. I spent a lot of years being really closed, and it wasn't until I read a book by a woman called Maureen Murdoch called The Heroine's Journey that she talked about the times that women in particular need to be alone. We need to be in the dark. We need to be on our own. And it's the descent into, death, down with the goddess, where we can just be held, and in the silence, in the quiet, we can have our grief. And that grief doesn't have to be as mine was for a child. That grief can be for the loss of a part of ourselves or a part of our life or a part of the person we would be, or just the loss that's around in the world. We can spend as much time in that space as we need to. And as soon as I read that, it was like, whoa, I can actually step out now, because I can give myself permission to say it was okay to stay there as long as I wanted. When you're recovering from grief, people will expect you to gradually come out, and if you don't, they kind of think, oh, she's labouring the point a bit there. So you learn to, again, put that persona on that, yes, I'm managing, I'm fine, whereas you're quietly dying and drowning still inside. So I felt guilty, and then the guilt led to shame, and the shame and the guilt will go round in circles. But when I read that it was absolutely okay to grieve as long as I want, to be closed as long as I want, then I was happy to stop. I know, just quirky, call me Irish, tell me something, but that's how it did for me.
No, and that makes sense.
I could come out.
There's a sense of relief in that. It's like, and then once you have that knowledge, then you can give yourself permission to go into the cave again if you need to. That it's like you don't have to bounce around and follow somebody else's agenda. Your first concern needs to be taking care of you. Yes. And if that means that occasionally you do have to go into the cave and close the door, that's okay. No guilt. Yep. I guess we'll put a little asterisk on that because there are, states beyond that when you can move into actual clinical depression and other things where you need to put the hand up and ask for help. But there's no problem with going in and closing for a while whilst you, I guess, recalibrate yourself. And then when you're ready to come out.
It's a recharge. It really is the point to recharge and say, I need this time to reflect or even just to be and allow yourself that time and step out from, your busy life or your busy family or whatever it is and give yourself that self-care. It is absolutely critical and take as long as you need. But there is a but, because there is that be ready to ask for help. And for me, that was the most important thing that I just really struggled with. Some people will ask a person for help. Some people will reach for a book. And I was always the kind of person that would reach for a book. And that was one of the reasons why it really tipped me over into saying, okay, I'm going to publish the book, because if it helps one person like me find a signpost that gets them going, then that's great.
Oh, without a doubt, I'm one of those people who reaches for books. There's no secret. I was actually posting about this in the Next Chapter Facebook group in our community there. And I just, as I said, just been for the retreat. And I found a bookshop. And one of the girls...
They're like magnets, aren't they?
They are. They're just completely magnetic to me. And one of the girls suggested I needed a book intervention. But there is, that is one of the ways in which I search. And it's what I'm drawn to. And I think if you can take... one or two things, or in the case of your book, many things out of that you can then take action on and implement in your life, then it's money and time and energy very well spent.
Thank you. The final, conflicted and confused.
Yes.
We don't always get it right. Even if we've gone through and you realise, yep, I've been to the transformation workshop, I've been to the retreat, and now I know what my underlying fear is, and I'm doing this. And it's absolutely okay then to be really confused and to be really conflicted and say, well, but is this really what I want to do? Because the instructions or the advice that you get from other people and from books and from retreats and all the fabulous mentors and teachers who are out there worked really well for them. And often they see it work really well for lots of other people. You have to find the right way to do it for yourself. And so let yourself sit in that confusion. Be really conflicted about what you want to do and try lots of stuff. And my family will, laugh at this, because I spent really, apart from one job, no more than 2 or 3 years in any one position, because I would get, okay, I've done that. What's next? What's next? What's next? You don't have to change jobs to get over being confused and conflicted, but you can look at the way you are doing things and think, well, actually, I might try a different way. And then you go back to being conscious and curious and what are the possibilities. So let yourself be human. Let yourself have those times when, you know what, I've got no freaking idea where I'm going. I'm just going to the movies, or I'm ringing the girlfriends and saying, let's have a wine. Whatever that is, let yourself be human.
I think that's extremely wise advice. And from what you were saying before, if we do look back, we'll see that there's been other times in our life, just like when you were saying that we'd found evidence of when we've been resilient and when we've been courageous. Mm-hmm. You'll find ample evidence of when you've been damn confused, completely conflicted, and oh my God, I can't ever imagine getting through this or over this or around this. But this too will pass, and we always get through. So I think another wise friend said to me once about one of the best things we can do is get comfortable with being uncomfortable. It mightn't be fun, it mightn't be enjoyable, but it's not going to kill you. So just sit with it. Just sit with it. Explore, but you don't necessarily have to have a timetable. And I should have this all worked out by now.
Yes,
there are no shoulds.
That other word, yes.
Okay, no just, no but, no should.
No should. Yeah, that's it. Out of the vocabulary.
That trilogy has to go. And then we come full circle, because as you're saying, we may go through all of those signposts for one area, for one thing, for one stage, and then we find ourselves catapulting into another stage, into another area of exploration, and we'll be back to being curious again.
Yes, yeah. Or confused.
And probably both.
Exactly.
Well, it does very much sound as though there's a lot of wisdom and experience of yourself and the coaching that you specialize in now with women, and so much of life experience that's been wrapped into that book, and it's definitely a worthwhile read. So, as I said, I'll make sure that we've got the links in that in the show notes. So, as we end this beautifully wholehearted conversation, what would you say to the woman who is like standing on the edge of her next chapter? Like, I really want to change, I want to expand, I want to go here or there, or I'm not quite sure where to go, and they're a little bit paralyzed. What would you say to that woman?
I'd ask her a question. I'd say, what would happen if you showed up as all of who you are and then stepped into it?
That's the connecting. Connect all the pieces of you. What might be possible then?
Yeah.
Oh, that's a journaling question if I've ever heard one.
Oh, yeah.
But that was wonderful.
Sure. Yeah.
Thank you so much for spending your time here with me today, and just for sharing this. It's been one of those beautifully buoyant conversations that I've really enjoyed, and I've got no doubt that our listeners have as well. So where can we find you in the big wide world if we want to get more of Veronica?
Yeah, so ideally go to the www.veronicastrachan.com, which is STRACHAN.com, and from there you can see the book and the workbook, which has 10 mindful exercises to just help you along some of those signposts. And there's also some connections to my coaching and some of the work that I do still in the health sector, where I work with teams and departments to help them find their way to a more powerful and compassionate leadership. And the link to my Women Who Care, which is my group where we look after and give each other some time to be confused and to be recharged. It's a not-for-profit group that I've put together for health and aged care, and it's fabulous. It's just dinner and wine and somebody inspiring to come to speak to us. So you can see all of those links at veronicastrachan.com. And I'm on Twitter at True Dialogue, and on Facebook at Veronica Strachan 8 is the easiest way to pick me up.
Well, I'll make sure that we've got all those links there so people can come and follow you and get involved in your world, which is a very affirming one. Thank you again so much.
Thanks, Angela. It has been a joy to catch up with you, and I really hope that the listeners do find their way home.
I hope they do too. Thank you, darling. And so, dear listener, I have that same hope for you of finding your way home. To me, that home, that home base where you feel safe and you feel excited, sometimes a little confused and conflicted, but definitely as you start to pull the pieces together and connect to what's true for you, and therefore what's possible for you, because there is a world of possibility out there for you. And those experiences that you've had in your life, as we've heard from Veronica and so many other guests that are on the Your Next Chapter podcast, you can then put that together into a next step, and you have value and so much that you can give to other people. So I'm excited about those possibilities for you. So take a moment to go in and have a look at Veronica's book. As you can hear from the conversation today, there's so much value in recognizing those signposts and asking yourself the questions that help you expand and then connect to your true home. And wouldn't that be a wonderful place to expand into your next chapter from? So thanks so much for spending your time here with us today, and until next time, take care. This is Angela Rasper saying goodbye for now.
Thanks for listening to the Your Next Chapter podcast. If you've enjoyed this episode, please let me know. Pop over to angelaraspers.com to subscribe to the show and leave a review. And whilst you're there, you can